The king likes to take his daily walks when he's at Highgrove. He likes to take his daily walkabout. He likes to give feedback to the staff. He likes to quiz them. In recent years, things have got very unhappy with the gardening team, the head gardening team at Highgrove. They have lost 11 out of the 12 gardeners since March 2022. That is a lot of staff. You don't turn down, you don't chuck in a job at Highgrove if you're a gardener. I don't imagine there are wonderful, lots and lots of gardening jobs going up, beautiful royal gardening kind of venues. Anyway, including head gardeners. Let me just read you what happened when he was walking. He was doing a walkabout, and he was talking to a probationary gardener, so presumably a young lad or a trainee gardener. And the gardener made a factual error about a flower. And you know what King Charles said? Don't put that man in front of me again.
Joking.
It's really bullying behaviour. It's really, and I'm not an anti-monarchist at all, but this actually is.
Let's stretch this lens wide open, because when GB News, the same platform that has spent years running defense for the crown and serving as a loudspeaker for royal propaganda, dares to break rank and use the word bully in connection with King Charles, that's not just a red flag, that's a royal alarm bell clanging through every corridor of Buckingham Palace. GB News has practically built a cottage industry out of demonizing Meghan Sussex for blinking too loudly, for breathing too freely, for not playing the quiet, subservient royal wife. They have rallied to Charles's image like a PR agency in crisis mode. Every time he's been called out for his hypocrisy, GB News has stepped in with excuses, with spin, with the stiff upper lip of denial. And yet, when the Highgrove Gardener Exodus story broke, even they couldn't hold the dam. They didn't reframe it as a staffing mix-up. They didn't blame modern work culture or woke sensibilities. No, they called it what it was, a bullying environment. And if GB News, with all their monarchist loyalty, is using that language, you better believe there's fire under all this smoke. Because this wasn't a leak, this wasn't a rogue quote buried in a tabloid, this was a coordinated mass walkout. 11 out of 12 full-time gardeners said no more, dropped their tools, and walked away from Highgrove, the so-called crown jewel of Charles's Green Kingdom. And they didn't slink away in silence. They left stories in their wake. Now, with the palace walls echoing with whispers and the world's eyes fixed on the monarchy, the question isn't just what happened at Highgrove, but what else might be waiting to come to light. Stories of handwritten memos laced with criticism in red ink like some schoolboy's essay returned from the headmaster. Stories of unrelenting pressure, surveillance-style oversight, and an emotional atmosphere so corrosive that staff had to start documenting every move they made just to avoid being thrown under the Royal Range Rover. This wasn't some light managerial misstep. It was a pattern of controlling, belittling behavior that clearly had roots deep in the monarch's character. Charles wasn't just being a perfectionist, he was being oppressive. He wasn't just managing a household, he was cultivating fear, shame, and emotional exhaustion. And the irony? This is the same man who spent decades burnishing his image as the Green King, the gentle steward of the earth, the philosophical heir to Gaia herself. We were told that Charles was the sensitive royal, the one who talked to plants and listened to Bach while sipping organic wine. But behind that curated image lies a far grimmer reality, one where plants are cherished, but people are crushed under the weight of impossible expectations and royal temper tantrums. How can a man claim to champion sustainability when he can't sustain a single long-term gardening team? What kind of king preaches harmony with nature but cultivates toxicity in every human relationship beneath him? This is the unraveling of a decades-long deception. Charles was never the benevolent monarch the press sold to us. He was just better at hiding the cracks. But now those cracks are bursting open, and not just at Highgrove. Look back at the countless other red flags over the years. The tales of valets laying out his pajamas and squeezing toothpaste onto his brush, the tantrums over improperly arranged breakfast trays, the explosive rage over leaky pens. These weren't charming quirks. They were signs of someone who views the people around him not as fellow humans, but as extensions of his will. And if you dare disappoint him, prepare for the cold shoulder, or worse, the boiling rage masked behind a posh accent and calligraphy. And here's where the hypocrisy hits like a slap. Charles is still standing tall, unchallenged in his throne, swaddled in royal sympathy, while Meghan Sussex was dragged through the mud for simply existing. She was branded difficult for daring to work, for asking questions, for suggesting modernization. The woman who created a cookbook with Grenfell survivors and advocated for mental health was skewered. The woman who said, "I was suicidal and they wouldn't help me," was called a liar. Meanwhile, Charles has now been accused of creating a workplace so psychologically damaging that people are fleeing, and the same media that had breathless insider reports on Meghan's nail polish can barely string together a paragraph about it. Why? Because one is a biracial American woman who challenged the status quo, and the other is the king, the status quo incarnate. This is what systemic protection looks like. The institution rallies around Charles not because he's moral, or kind, or capable, but because he represents continuity. He represents the myth, the fiction that the monarchy is stable, dignified, and worthy of reverence. And let's talk about those internal reviews, because every time a royal scandal breaks, whether it's Prince Andrew's disgrace, William and Kate's PR flops, or Charles's bullying, what do we hear? There will be an internal review. And just like that, the walls close in. The same institution that stood silent while Meghan begged for mental health support suddenly finds its voice when it's time to protect the crown. And let's be honest, those reviews aren't about justice. They're about containment, damage control, ensuring that whatever rot exists within the palace stays neatly tucked behind its golden gates. But the people are waking up. Britain is weary. The pandemic, the economic hardship, the growing hunger for accountability, these forces have cracked the glossy veneer of royal untouchability. The idea that Charles can mismanage a workplace so badly that nearly every employee quits and still be considered a model of leadership, that's laughable. That's insulting to every real leader out there who's actually earning respect instead of demanding it. And now we have to reckon with the fact that King Charles doesn't just represent a problem, he is the problem. His inability to lead with compassion, to treat staff with dignity, to listen instead of dictate, has exposed the hollow core of the monarchy. Meghan was mocked for not understanding royal protocol, but what was that protocol worth? What culture was she expected to assimilate into? One that protects bullies, silences victims, and rewards cruelty with crowns? Let's also not forget Charles's track record within his own family. The man couldn't console his grieving sons after Diana's death. He couldn't defend his own son, Prince Harry, when the press went on a racist feeding frenzy. He stood by while Meghan was torn to shreds, then claimed ignorance when asked why no help was given. So let's stop pretending this is an isolated incident. Highgrove is a symptom. The disease is unchecked power. The monarchy has functioned for centuries by sweeping abuses under velvet rugs, by dressing dysfunction in silk sashes. But the Gardiners didn't just leave, they spoke out, and that is revolutionary in a system designed to suppress truth. Their bravery is a reminder that even within the most archaic institutions, truth has a way of pushing through the cracks. And what is GB News going to do now? Will they walk back their words? Will they pretend they never said bully? Or will they finally accept that the man they've defended for years is no better than the people they've smeared? Time will tell. But for now, that one word, bully, has shifted the ground beneath the monarchy's feet, and it's a tremor that won't go away. King Charles isn't just caught in his own mess, he made the mess, and no amount of red ink, royal portraits, or carefully planted hedges can cover that up. The monarchy doesn't need another internal review. It needs a reckoning, and maybe, just maybe, Britain is ready to demand it.